Hi everyone, Anthony Morganti here. Today, On1 Software released the latest version of On1 Photo Raw, version 2022. In this video, I'm going to talk about some of the things that are new in this version and a couple things specifically that I'm disappointed in. There are actually quite a few new features in this latest version of On1 Photo Raw. I'm not going to talk about all of them in this video. In the description below this video, I'll have a link to this webpage. This webpage goes over each of these new features. Now, I will be talking about a few of these. If there's anything specific you want me to cover in a future video, let me know in the comments below. Now, I mentioned I was disappointed in a couple things. I'm going to talk about that right off the top so that you don't have to wait to the end of the video or anything like that. First of all, do you know, let's say, if you are a Lightroom or Photoshop user, here's Lightroom, right? In the past, if you wanted to send an image into On1 Photo Raw, you could use it as a plugin, right? So you could right click on the image, you could go down to edit in, and you'll notice that I have plugins for On1 Develop 2021, Effects, No Noise, Portrait, Resize. All those are the 2021 version of On1 Photo Raw. You'll notice there's no 2022 version. That's because with the package that I think most of you are probably buying, it no longer will be working as a plugin in Lightroom and Photoshop. Yes, so the package that you probably purchased will not work as a plugin in Lightroom and Photoshop. If you need On1 Photo Raw to work as a plugin in those Adobe products, you're going to have to purchase the Ultimate package. Now, what is the Ultimate package? Well, let's go over here, and you'll notice this is the sale page where you could purchase On1 Photo Raw 2022, and they have three versions or three categories. You could subscribe to it, and if you subscribe to it, you get the updates for free. Every time it's updated once a year. Once a year, they have a paid upgrade. You'll get that paid upgrade for free if you subscribe. If you'd prefer not to subscribe, but you're a previous owner of an earlier version of Photo Raw, you could get it for $79.99. Now, these prices are the prices for me in the United States. Where you live, your prices may vary. If you don't own Photo Raw at all, you've never owned it before, it would cost you $99.99. These versions are versions that will not have the plugins for Adobe products. Let's click on Buy Now for the upgrade. And when we do that, we'll get a shopping cart. And you'll see that there is this On1 Photo Raw 2022 Ultimate Upgrade. It's Photo Raw plus all 5 plugins. See, it's $149, so it's $70 more. That is the version you would have to purchase to get those plugins. So I'm a little disappointed in that because, as you know, in the past, it always worked as a plugin in Lightroom and Photoshop. Now, it doesn't unless you spend that extra $70 to get the Ultimate package, which will give you those plugins. So, disappointed in that. Now, specifically, here, let's go to On1. They have some new features. Some of the features are, not as significant as some of the others. And the one big feature they're talking about, though, is a one-click sky replacement, similar to how Luminar does it. Luminar 4, Luminar AI, and supposedly Luminar Neo when that is released. What I found is it works well in many instances, but it doesn't work so well in some instances. Now, it is the first iteration of this release. I'm sure they're going to improve it down the line. At least I hope they'll improve it down the line. But where I found it works great when there's trees and mountains in the background, and it doesn't work so well when there are buildings in the background. So when you want to replace the sky, I have this image here. I did some editing in the develop module of On1 Photo Raw 2022, and I want to replace the sky. You'll see there's a sky tab right here. If we click on that, it will take a second as it finds the sky. You can see there, okay, it found the sky and it has a mask. You can see right here's a little mask. Now, if I want to replace the sky, let's say I just want to put clouds up there, I'll just click right here and I'll click on clouds. And you can see it put the clouds there. Now, obviously, those don't look good for this specific image. So I could click this drop down and I could see that there's all these categories. There's Aurora Borealis, the clouds, dramatic clouds, night, sky, storm clouds, sunset. Let's stay with clouds since this is a day scene. Then under sky, we have a number of clouds that came with On1 Photo Raw, like here. So that looks a little more natural. And you can see it did a nice job. Now, it does have the ability to add the reflection. So down here, I'll just click right here. And you can see it added the reflection. And it did a pretty good job. And we have control over everything. So you could see all the different sliders. We could shift the horizon up or down. And you can see that the reflection moves with it accordingly. We could fade the edge if we need to, you know, those trees weren't coming in as well or something like that. We could fade the edge. We could shift the edge. That could help the trees come in a little better. Up at the top, we could make it larger or smaller. We could affect the warmth so we could better match the image. We could affect the brightness so it'll better match the image. We could add atmospheric haze or remove atmospheric haze. We could blur it because, you know, maybe it needs to be blurred because our background is blurred. So you could do that. You could also affect the angle of the blur too, which is kind of cool. So you could kind of change the blur a little bit with that. Now the foreground, this is the part, the original image, the lighting itself, you could adjust that. So you could kind of get everything to match together. And so that it really does work very well. Also, you have access to the mask directly, unlike, let's say, Luminar. So you could click on here and you could see the mask and you could affect the density of the mask, the feathering of the mask, and so on. To all this to help it better kind of blend into the image. I got it very well, yeah. Shift it down a little more. All right, so it did really very well on this image. But let's see where I mentioned it kind of fails and what you could do to fix it. All right, this is an image. Obviously, we have a nice clean sky. We have buildings, right? And I mentioned it doesn't work as well with buildings. So we'll go to sky. Click here again. It does the little mask thing. We'll click on clouds. And it replaced the clouds. And you see how on this building here, it's overlapping the clouds a little bit. Like it didn't really notice that there's a building there. So we could come in and we could try to affect the opacity. No, that ain't gonna help, right? We could fade the edge. See how it's taking more of the buildings away. We could shift the edge. See if that helps. That helps a little bit, but it's kind of making the sky look horrible, right? So this, in this instance, and what I found in the little bit I've been experimenting with this, it doesn't work as well when there are buildings in the background, but it works great with trees and mountains. So with that, what you could do is you could still kind of come in here and move these sliders around and see what you could come up with that. What you may end up having to do, though, is you may have to use the masking brushes to try to get it to mask in properly. So you would click on the mask brush here. I would use the regular mask brush and then make sure that you're using the perfect brush. So make sure the perfect brush is turned on. Then use the bracket keys. The right bracket key makes it larger, left bracket key smaller. And we're going to paint out. We want to paint the clouds away from this building. So you would click right on there. And because we're using the magic brush, we don't have to worry about going outside the lines as much. It should take care of it. I think there's some antenna up here. Yep, I think it did. So you might have to dress it up a little bit when it comes to building. Now again, this is the first iteration of this release where, you know, one-click sky replacement. So I expect it to improve with subsequent upgrades, but just wanted you to be aware of that. So I'm disappointed in that it doesn't work as a plugin in Lightroom and Photoshop any longer, unless you buy that Ultimate package. And I'm slightly disappointed because at least with most of my images, where I live in the city, have buildings in them. So it's more problematic for me to replace the sky because I have to work on it a little bit. I mean, but you saw it was easy enough. So in this, it doesn't look too bad, right? So those are the things. Now, as I mentioned, there are a lot of new features. One new feature I want to talk about very quickly is they say if you have some plugins for Lightroom and Photoshop, not On1 plugins, like other plugins that are in Lightroom and Photoshop, those plugins will work in On1 Photo Raw 2022. And I was very intrigued by this. I was wondering, how are they going to do that? Well, first of all, by default, they won't be there. You have to get them in there. So I'm going to show you how to do that. For this image, I believe it's under Layer. Yeah, under Layer. And if I go over to Filter, this is where they would be. And you can see no filters found. And you saw a moment ago when I right-clicked in Lightroom, I have all kinds of Lightroom plugins. Tons of different Lightroom plugins. They're not showing up here. So what you need to do to get them in here is you need to go to On1 Preferences. On a Mac, On1 Preferences are under the On1 Photo Raw 2022 menu. On a PC, I believe they're under the Edit menu. You could correct me if I'm wrong in the comments below. We'll go to Preferences, and we want to go to Plugins. And you can see the Open Default folder. So two different ways you could do this. If you have plugin files, and you know where they are, you could open the default folder, then open up another folder that has those files in them and copy them into this folder. Then they'll show up under that filter menu. The other thing you could do is if you have Lightroom and Photoshop installed on your computer, just click right here and it will automatically go to the Adobe folder that has those plugins in it. It will default to that. If it, for some reason, picks the wrong folder, you could click on Choose and navigate to where that folder is. Now, I don't have to do that because it picked the correct folder. So I'm going to click OK. Now, I believe I'm going to have to restart On1. Let's see. Yes, I will. So I'm going to close down On1 Photo Raw 2022. And I'm going to close down Lightroom too because I don't need that anymore. And let's go back to On1. And once this opens, I will then again go to the Edit module here. And there, I'll go to Layer, Filters, and now you can see those plugins are there. I had Boris Effects plugins, Exposure Software, Nick Collection, Skylum, that's Luminar 4 and Luminar AI, and Topaz Labs. Now, I haven't tried any of these. As you can see, I just installed them. So I will do future videos on this and make sure this all works properly. I'm not going to spend the time in this video going through various plugins. I'm going to see which of these work perfectly and which work maybe not so well and which don't work at all. So we'll talk about that in a future video. And of course, if you have experience with any plugins working or not working like this, in the latest version of On1 Photo Raw 2022, let us know in the comments below. All right, so that is that. The other thing they've added a new feature is where you could create time-lapse movies. Now, I don't have a lot of images like for a time-lapse, but I can do a demo with what I have. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the Browse module, time-lapse folder, and you can see that I have a number of images here, not too many. Actually, I wasn't even using a tripod. I just had my camera on high speed, just pressed the shutter down and took a bunch of images. I'm not even sure what I was doing. So I have all these images here. So I want to create a time lapse of these images. So I'll click on the first one, hold the Shift key down, click on the last one, so they're all selected. Then a couple different ways you could do this. You could just right click on any of them and you could go down to Create Time Lapse. Or with them all selected, you could go up to File and down to Create, or just Time Lapse it says here. Then when you do that, this little tiny time-lapse dialog comes in, and we could maybe make it bigger. Although making it bigger makes it look weird, so we'll just leave it like this. Now we have some options. Raw input, fast raw, embedded JPEG's the fastest. Let's just use fast raw. The size, you could go 4K, but we'll leave it at HD, 1920 by 1080 just for this demo. Now you could letterbox the content. Right now, because it's going to be a 1920 by 1080, it has to crop into the image to make it fit the frame. If you letterbox the content, you could see how it has these black bars on either side. So we're not cropping at all. You could see the cropped, uncropped. Let's letterbox it. Codec you want to use, the most common is H.264, and that will give you the smaller file. ProRes is going to give you a very large file. Quality, we'll go with high. Frames per second, 24, 25, or 30. Let's go with 30. Now this speed slider, this is counterintuitive. You may think that if you move it to a lower number, that it's going to go slower. It doesn't. It goes fastest here. So if we move it up there, that's the slowest it will go. So because I don't have many images here, let's go with the slowest. So all the way to the right. And we could detect camera movement. Since I wasn't using a tripod, there is camera movement, a lot of camera movement. So we're going to try to detect it and reduce flicker. That's in between frames. There's always going to be a little flicker, and that will help reduce it if we check that. You also could come in and inspect each individual frame with this. You can see the camera movement there as I slide that probably. Okay, now you have the option to process it in the background. If you had a very large time lapse with a lot of individual images, you may want to do that in background. So you could do other work in On1 while that's happening. In this case, because there's not many images, it won't take very long to create the video. And I'm going to do just that. I'm going to click on that button. And when it creates the video, you can see this, it's going to put it up in here somewhere. And there it is. Okay, it's right here. For some reason, it just kind of plops it in there somewhere. And let's look at it. So I'm going to double click on it, and it will open outside of On1. It's opened in my QuickTime on my Mac. And I'll hit play. As you can see, it's a 2-second video, so it's not very long. But you can see there's movement because I was moving. So that is a nice feature. You could create time lapses. And I know many cameras have time-lapse features in them. Most cameras do nowadays. So you could properly, not hand-hold it, you could properly create time-lapse images in camera and then use On1 to, to create the time-lapse. All right, another thing, let's talk real quick. I thought this is kind of a nice feature. You could see that when I'm in browse mode in the grid view, that we have this image and we have the star ratings and the heart and whether you like it or not, the name of the image. You could control all this info. Just right click right on it, go to thumbnail view options, and you'll get this dialog box. What size? Do you want small or normal size? Do you want them to fit or fill? I have them fit. Do you want a dark theme or a light theme? You can see there's the light theme, dark theme. I should show you there's fill. See how they just get big like that? I like fit. So I could see the entire image. What do you want on the left? You have, right now I have ratings and label. That's the color label. You could put the extension there, the file name base. So you could put whatever info you want, where you want it on the image at the bottom. File name, always show or only when you mouse over the image. So if I do that and click OK, as you can see here on this one, that's not selected. If I mouse over it, all that info shows when I mouse over it. So you have a lot of options now. I like it always. But you could see rotate arrows, and you could add all that or remove all that. You can see the rotate arrows are there. So a lot of control over the thumbnail. So I think that's it. I didn't want this video to go on too long. I'm sorry it was kind of negative. I usually try to make my videos more positive. But I wanted you to be aware of these things that you might be upset about, mainly the plugin issue for those of you that do use Lightroom and Photoshop. And that sky replacement feature doesn't seem to always want to work with buildings. And I will do more videos on that in the future, workarounds and things like that. But I'm sure they will address that. Well, one other thing I'll talk about real quick. They now have noise reduction On1 no noise integrated into On1 Photo Raw 2022. To get to that, you need to go to the Edit panel. Let's go to the Develop module and down to Noise and Sharpening, and you can see there's a tab here, No Noise AI, and you can see it will do its thing. So it is now integrated inside of On1 Photo Raw 2022. So you could remove noise. There actually wasn't any noise in this image. Probably wasn't the best image to demo, but I just wanted to show you where it is because you may be looking for it and not realize that it's under this Noise and Sharpening tab in the Develop module of the Edit panel. So that's it for now. Let me know your thoughts on On1 Photo Raw 2022. Any videos you want me to do in the future, specifically on the new features found in this version of the software, let me know and I'll be happy to try to do them. Thank you, everyone who watches my videos. I really do appreciate it. I'll talk to you guys soon.